chapter 12 of the book of John. And escape. So this is interactive. For if you're on YouTube, you're not interactive because nobody's looking at it. But if you're on Zoom or you're in person, it's expected to interrupt me and talk back. And please use a microphone so that the people on Zoom can hear, because they will communicate, they'll talk periodically as well. Yeshua, therefore, 6 days before Passover, came to Bethany where Lazarus was, whom Yeshua had raised from the dead. So they made him a supper there, and Martha was serving, but Lazarus was one of those reclining at the table with him. Mary then took a pound of very costly perfume of pure nard and anointed the feet of Yeshua and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, who was one of his disciples, who was intending to betray him, said, "Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and given to poor?" And he said this not because he was concerned about the poor, because he was a thief. And as he had the money box, he used to pilfer what was put into it. What a guy. Can you imagine walking around 3 years with the Messiah, feeding thousands, feeding hundreds, resurrecting people, right? Healing sick, blind, lame, staring down the Pharisees, and the whole time being just there to swipe money. That's terrible. But he was there for a reason, because he had to have that betrayer. The betrayer role had to exist. Somebody who could be tempted with the 30 pieces of silver. He had to be there. But that's just, I mean, could you imagine even being the disciples and knowing that? And how could you see Yeshua know what people are thinking? He knows what people are thinking, and this guy's stealing. How could he be like, I'm getting away with it? Muaha, right? He's not getting away with anything. Yes, sir.
Uh, I read the parallel account in Matthew 26,
Uh-huh.
and it doesn't say there that Judas was a thief. It doesn't name him,
Yeah.
but it does say right after this that that's when he decided to betray the Messiah.
Yeah.
So like literally the next verse after this in Matthew 26.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. This was like the last straw for him.
Yeah. Well, when I saw this too, I also went to the other accounts to see if they recorded that, and they didn't. So I could find. But yeah. But he did go betray right after. Yeah, Tiffany.
Well, it just shows that the wolves in sheep's clothing are amongst you and you don't even realize it. So that's why he said the wheat and the tares, because there are people who will be with you who act like your friend, your brother, your sister, and all along the while they're gonna turn against you.
And that really causes us a problem of confidence. Okay. Okay. Because you don't know. I mean, that level of uncertainty for this individual to have been there the whole time and not actually be vested, that shows you that people are, it's hard to trust, for those of us to have trust issues. Sir.
Yeah, and none of the other disciples suspected him. Like at the Last Supper, they're all guessing like who's the betrayer, like who's gonna do it. No,
Right.
like he did go undetected.
That's true. Yeah, that's absolutely true. They were, but then again, if you think about it, if you're with a bunch of people, you've been with them for years, you've done a bunch of good, you're not ever thinking evil of your brother. If you're really in this walk, you're thinking that we're all altruistic. We're all here together. Yeah.
I mean, we're day in and day out, we've been with people for years, and it just takes one time to walk over the threshold of something that's, if you're tempted by, and he may not have been the thief forever. It's just whatever was going on in his life. I need that money, or whatever situations they didn't have to be deceitful the whole time. We don't know.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. In this case, it says he was thief for a while, but you're talking in real life, you don't know. Yeah.
That's why you're always on guard and always in the word of Yah, because you can be tripped up by something in the world to get you off the path.
Yeah.
It
So,
was
oh,
amazing.
go ahead, sir.
It was amazing to me that in my former fellowship, uh, we had, thousands of people who seemed to be with the program. But when they changed the program and said, well, you really don't need to worry about what the scripture says anymore, everybody was happy to, go along with it and to give up the faith. It was truly amazing.
That would be very surreal because it's for people like us, for people who have switched from Sunday to this
Yeah.
is a very violent event and it's hardcore. You have to be really committed even to challenge the things that we challenge. Most of Christianity just shrugs and does what everybody else does. And so for people to have gone from that extreme to this extreme and then went back, yeah.
And that's exactly what happened to most of the people. I mean, some had, grown up from young children, but for the most part, yeah, people had to, say goodbye to their friends and their fellowship, their congregation, their Baptist and whatever,
Yeah.
church they were going to, and leave and then to say, I guess I was wrong, we don't need to worry about it. So back they go.
And that, you first.
I was gonna say this part of that is doing right what's in your own eyes and what was in their heart. It starts within your heart, right? So if they wanted to do it in their flesh, they just wanted someone to justify that are going to be their actions or whatever. So if they wanted to go out to eat on Shabbat, or if they wanted to, whatever they did to break the Shabbat or break the law, it was already in their heart to want to do that. So they just needed that push from someone of authority or something to say, yeah, you could do that. And then they're like, yep, I can do it. I've got the okay.
Yeah. And my mom specifically, but many of my family members have seen, as I've been on this walk since 2099 or something, right? Yeah. They've always been waiting for me to return, to legitimize their beliefs, right? And that's the sad part. And one of the parts of my walk is when you read these books, I guess we don't have any laying around right now. They're all loaned out. But you read these books and you realize that theology professors go to college and learn what we know. And then they get out and they don't tell their congregations. They get out with all their degrees and they say, yeah, it's okay. Like that Pat Robertson video we have where he says, it's okay, we Christianized Christmas. You can do it now. And that's jaw-dropping, right? But they're waiting for, my mom died waiting for me to return to the sacraments. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm not doing that, and that does harms the gospel so much when people like us return, because then that really just solidifies the people who never thought to look. They go, oh, well, I don't have to look. This person they went out, they came back, and so that's a problem. Anyway, so Yeshua says, let her alone that she may keep it for the day of my burial, for you always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me. He spoke of his burial. Do you think they had a clue what was about to happen? Yeah, I think it becomes clear throughout this that they had no idea what was. They were sitting there waiting for him to become Judas Maccabeus and push those Romans out and take his seat on the throne and cleanse that temple and restore the earthly, Jerusalem. And he's like, yeah, that's not how this is going to work. Either she knew or the Spirit put it in her to go and anoint his feet for burial, right? And, to do that honorable thing. But even she probably didn't know. Now, it takes a very dark turn in the next 3 verses. It's a very dark turn. The large crowd of the Jews then learned that he was there, and they came not for Yeshua's sake only, but they might also see Lazarus, whom he raised from the dead. But the chief priests planned to put Lazarus to death also, because on account of him, many of the Jews were going away and believing in Yeshua. Okay. These people are messed up. Okay. But why wouldn't it dawn on them that if he could raise the guy from the dead once, that he could probably do it again, right? Right? They're gonna what? Like, how many times does he have to come back up and he'd be like, "Look, guys, you're not killing this guy," right? Right? He's, and this is really the Isaiah passage. Woe to those who do, who's who call evil good and good evil, really rings through in this, because this starts chapters ago. So it continues on. We use the chapters and verses because they're convenient, but they're not really there. And it becomes very apparent. John 10 and 11, we put together because he was in a sentence. Yeshua was like talking and they put a chapter in there. It's like, why did you do that? Right? It was the same thing. But this is just astonishing. Everett, sorry, I don't look down often enough.
Yeah, it kind of struck me the Jews were going away and were believing in him. I can understand that the Pharisees or the chief priest would feel a certain amount of loss of respect, but where were the Jews going? I suspect that they still showed up in the synagogue on the Sabbath. They were to tithe to the Levites, the priests. That must have still been being done. Yeshua didn't demand they tithe to him. So it seems to me that their loss was strictly a mental kind of position of power or an authority or something like that they were somehow feeling diminished there.
So think they're losing their grip on the people, and they had set up a false mediatorship. That's the story here, is that they wanted to be the mediator between Yahweh and the people, and he's coming in and breaking that down. He's breaking that system down, and they don't want to hear it. But these people are not different than we are today, because imagine if you're Rick Warren and you've got Saddleback and all the satellites, and somebody sticks their hand up in the air and they say, "Rick, what do you think about what John MacArthur preached last week?" Right? Then Rick's going to be like, "What? I'm about to lose all this to John MacArthur," right? You got to be pretty humble to not worry. Well, it's really, you should just be normal. But these guys who build the big empires, they're worried about losing their empire, right? Yeah. We don't have any empires. If you were here in the building, you'd see this is not an empire, right? Right? It's a tiny little room, right? And so, and we have, all the people on YouTube. April sent me something from David Wilbur. I talked to Jay at American Torah Online throughout the week. We all don't care, right? We're all like, everybody's on the right path. Let's see if we can pitch in. So it's kind of a different mindset, because when you really trust the Holy Spirit, you don't really have anything to worry about, right? But these guys are losing their income. They're losing their authority. They're losing their power base. They're really worried about it, to the point of planning 2 premeditated murders. You got to wonder, have they done it before? Right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you look, and when they find the serial killer, right? There was some serial killer that they found recently that they've been through DNA and whatever. They found that this guy killed like 10 other people they didn't even know. Right. So these guys have got issues. Tiffany,
there was no one before Yeshua, so they didn't have anybody to worry about before him.
But along the way, they were always trying to classify him as Sadducee, Pharisee, Essene, right? Or Zealot, because they wanted everybody in the boxes. So there were probably people before, right?
That
Yeah.
shook up their
Yeah.
status.
Oh, yeah. Bonnie? Yes, you do, Miss History Major. You you must come and tell us. Yes.
In my early Middle Ages history class, we were actually talking about Christianity a lot. And it was also talking about the relation between the Jews and the Romans. And I was not listening hard enough. This is the plot to kill Lazarus. If not.
Yeah, but they're plotting to kill him too. Go ahead.
To kill Lazarus as well as that he was stirring up a lot of trouble with the Romans as well, because the Romans had not a great peace with the Jews. They were okay with them, like tolerating, but Jesus was stirring things up, and the Romans were like talking to the Jewish leaders and like, get this guy under control. Revolts are not good, and we will kill you all. That's also part of the reason why the Jewish leaders were like plotting to kill him, because he was stirring things up everywhere.
That was last week. That was the chapter in last week. And the reason was the Romans did not like a lot of Jewish men gathering in one place because that looks like an uprising. And he was doing all this outdoor preaching where they were all coming and thousands and thousands of people were coming and sitting around peacefully. And they're like, wait a minute, right? Because they only have a garrison there. They don't have their entire army to fight back. So yes, thank you.
Kind of like in Egypt when they were suppressing the Hebrews because when they were going up in number, and then they wanted to put their finger down on them, so they wouldn't go against them,
Right.
and fight against them.
It's,
They were maybe feeling that way with them.
that's a big problem when all the people who do the physical labor decide to get mad at you. Right. Right. Yeah, you're right. Well, they're all the strong. They're all the strong people, and you're not. And that's yeah. So they get worried. There you go. Throwing bricks. That's right. So in verse 12, on the next day, the large crowd had come to the feast when they had heard Yeshua was coming to Jerusalem. Doesn't say feast of the Jews. Different. John notoriously calls it the feast of the Jews up until about here. And now it's just the feast. So there's got to be some significance there, but I don't know what it is. Right. Another unique thing is when the guy up front says, I don't know. Right. Right. I don't, if anybody has any ideas as to why that flips here, it gets all the speculation or whatever, please give it. Because I just noted it and I wanted to ask if anybody had any thoughts on that. Because we don't look at them as the feast of the Jews ourselves, or the feast of Yahweh that the Jews kept. And so when John uses feast of the Jews, this is a lot of reason why mainstream Christianity pushes people to read John first, because it puts a perspective in your mind that there's a separation that isn't really there. You know, the Jews and Christians were in the synagogue together until after about 110 AD. They were right alongside each other. Even Josephus refers to us as the tribe of the Christians. And that's a flattering term, by the way. He's not disparaging. He says very positive things about the followers of Yeshua. So it's not, so that separation wasn't there when this was written. It probably was starting, but it's just an intriguing thing. They took branches of the palm trees and went out to meet him and began to shout, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of Yahweh, even the King of Israel. Yeshua, finding a donkey, sat on it, as it is written, fear not, daughter of Zion. Behold, your king is coming, seated on a donkey's colt. One of the big reasons why I like to use this translation, this representation of the scriptures, is they often put direct quotations of the Tanakh in all caps. And so we can go and say, wonder why they did that. Because it's not just random words. They don't write this way. The Jews, John's a Jew, and he communicates like a Jew. They cited scripture different than we do. We say, Zechariah 9:9, right? They say, as it is written, and then they give a sentence which makes you go and look up the sentence to say, why is he doing that? They don't communicate the way that we do. Whether that's good or bad, it's just something to note so that way we can understand it. Because a lot of people misinterpret Paul notoriously because he quotes one verse that just doesn't make any sense with the rest of the passage. And people who don't know the Torah, they just think it's a sentence. But if you know to wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Let me go see where did that come. And then you go read the passage, like, oh, that's why he said that. You got to go read the whole thing. Takes time. People want tweets, not time. So this is Zechariah 9:9 for the donkey. Did I get the one for? Okay. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Psalm what? Yeah, I read too far because I wanted to look at both of them. So I have cheats. Psalm. His name is. So it's a lot of times does the Bible say this. Let's go look at Psalm 118. O Yahweh, do save, we beseech you. O Yahweh, we beseech you. Do send prosperity. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of Yahweh. We have blessed you from the house of Yahweh. Yahweh is our Elohim. He has given us light. Bind the festival sacrifice with cords and the horns of the altar. You are my Elohim. I give thanks to you. You are my Elohim. I extol you. Give thanks to Yahweh, for he is good, for his loving kindness is everlasting. Okie dokie. Yeshua goes on a few sentences from here and says he's the light. He was really quoting Psalm 118. And he says, bind the festival with cords. What did they do to him? He was the offering for Pesach, and they bound him and they took him away. Now, did anybody, when this psalm was written, did they know? Did anybody read this? Did they know? So after he's resurrected, he begins with Moses explaining everything about him. That means just about everything from Moses to Malachi is about him. And this is very intriguing when we see how perfect it lines up to something that nobody was expecting. And then we sit around the table and think that we know who the beast is. We don't know who the beast is, right? Right? We don't know who that is. We're not going to know who that is until we'll see it. It'll be over. We're like, oh, that's what that was, right? Right. And so we think that we're going to be so much better off than they were. And these guys, they still didn't get. If you look, Peter didn't get it for another 20 years. Peter was still, 10 years? He was still not eating with the Gentiles for 10 years after he got the Ruach, right? So we often have standards that that the Bible didn't have. Then what was the other reference to that is Psalm 72. Yeah, that was not as good. But then we'll go look at Zechariah 9:9 to talk about the donkey. Rejoice, O greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout in triumph, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and endowed with salvation, humble and mounted on a donkey, even on a colt, the foal of a donkey. What is the word salvation? Yeshua, right? Right? It's Yeshua coming on a donkey. And then he goes on, I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the horse from Jerusalem, and the bow of war will be cut off, and he will speak peace to the nations, and his dominion will be from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. So in the next couple sentences, they're going to say, we know the Messiah isn't going to die. They say he's going to be forever because of this. He even quotes this. Oh, he's going to be forever. You guys just don't understand how he gets there, right? He's not, and so it's anyway. Any thoughts before I continue rambling?
Yeah, based on the fact that the account starts in verse 1 about 6 days before the Passover, I went back at one point in time, after hearing it was possible to do so, and looked at it. And indeed, if you figure that out, that puts this occasion on the 10th of Nisan,
Oh.
which
Oh.
happens to be the day the lamb was chosen for the Passover.
Yep. Yep. There you go. Not accidental. Everything works like a clock, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty good stuff. So, oh, Vani, you were telling me they told you in class what year Yeshua was really born, didn't they? Yeah. 4 BC. Yep. You know why it's wrong? Do you know why all our entire clock is wrong? Anybody?
I have a friend that claims it isn't wrong, that 4 BC is wrong.
Okay.
And the reason he does that is because there was a certain eclipse that happened, and there's no such eclipse recorded around 4 BC. But there is around what would have been the year 0, if it'd been there.
So, all right. But the big reason that we don't fall in the year 0 category is because of the Friday, Sunday thing. They call a year 0 because the year he died, when you add the time, Pesach was on, I can't even do it right, on Friday, and then he was resurrected on Sunday. But if you go and look at the calendar to find out when it was Wednesday to Sunday, for Abib 14 to Abib 17, that's where we get the disparity, because we know that he was in the tomb for 3 days and 3 nights, not 17 plus hours, right?
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
so that's difficult to reconcile, So, yep. So these things his disciples did not understand at the first, but when Yeshua was glorified, they remembered that these things were written of him, and that he had done these things, and that they had done these things to him. So I keep repeating myself, repetition, repetition, repetition. When I first read the Bible, I thought it was a journal. I thought it was written in real time, that the Gospels were written in real time, that the letters were written in real time. This is just one of those places to point out this, and that the anecdote about him being a thief, that this was written way after the events occurred. Why does that matter? Because they don't write things like, this is the feast. Oh, by the way, you guys, I know we don't keep those anymore, right? But they use the word the feast, expecting the reader to understand what they're talking about, which shows that they continue to keep the Torah for decades afterwards. It's also very intriguing because, the 2 or 3 witnesses law, that we have 4 gospels that very, very much complement each other, that were all written decades after the fact by different people in different regions of the world. So it gives us a lot of confidence in what we're reading. So, Everett?
Well, when you talk about references, of course, Acts talks about the fast as opposed to the feast, expecting that people would know what that is.
Yep, absolutely. Well, after the fast is when is a marker for fall, that the seas are no longer avenues for transportation. That's what he says, that because the fast was passed, they had to put in at some place, and he calls it the fast, not parentheses. This is the Day of Atonement you Gentiles don't do. He just says the fast. Yeah. Yeah. It's all. It's also when Paul writes, well, Acts is not written by Paul, but when Paul writes to the Corinthians, he says, therefore, let us keep the feast, not with the leaven of the Pharisees, with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. It shows that his audience was expected to have a complete command, not just not just do it, but understand the different ways of applying it, and that they were really, really in tune with it. So the people who were with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead continued to testify about him. For this reason, also the people went and met him because they heard that he had performed this sign. So the Pharisees said to one another, "You see that you are not doing any good. The world has gone after him." Okay, nobody lights a lamp and puts it under a basket. The Pharisees were the people who had the Torah scrolls. They had the truth. They should have witnessed this. Even if they didn't understand it, they should have looked at the works and said, okay, how do we get behind this guy and not lose our power, right? Not how do we get rid of this guy. They should have been trying to figure out a way to complement him and to get him and to be associated with what was happening. But they're so upset that the world is going after him. But that's the point. The point. And you go ahead before I ramble. Yes, Marcin.
Sorry. It just reminds me of something Paul said about how light has no partnership with darkness.
Yeah. Yep. Because they're definitely pro darkness at this point. They want to keep it's very unfortunate and ironic the way the Roman church turned out to be identical to the Pharisees. The Roman church exactly did what these guys were doing and they were the keepers of the words to say, don't do that. The Roman church, and they even dressed the same, right? If you've been in a synagogue, we in a Roman church, Catholic church has 12 stations of the cross. Why? Because a synagogue has 12 flags for the tribes, right? You see the big altar that they have in the front of the synagogue is a giant table for rolling out a Torah scroll, right? If you see behind the altar on the Roman church, they have this golden box that they keep the Eucharist, right? You look behind the altar of a synagogue, they have a giant golden box where they keep the Torah, right? They're doing exactly the same thing. When they come in the procession to start the synagogue, they come in a Torah procession. When they come into Catholic church, they have the altar boy carrying the cross, right? I speak from experience, okay? Okay? Because I speak from experience as the kid who whacked the cross into the cross beam, right? And so the similarities are so stark that for a brief moment in time, maybe 100 years, we had a pure faith for about 100 years. And then the same things start happening. And they start building walls and blocking people out to try to be the mediator between man and God. What do they call the Pope? The Vicar of Christ. They call him Father. They say that their hierarchy is between mankind and God. It's not true, right? It's not, there's no way. That's not, Yeshua died so that we could stop doing that and come to the feet of the cross ourselves. The temple thing was torn in two. So, the world has gone after him. They're uttering prophecies against themselves. And they're, even though they were looking for Messiah and knew the scriptures, their perceptions and life experiences clouded their ability to see what was right in front of them. And we share that experience because at one point in time, we were, except for my kids who have never eaten a thing of pork and have never done a pagan holiday, right? My kids are raised in this. Those of us who weren't, when you read the Bible, you went to church growing up, you knew it all from off the top of your head, you knew it. And at some point, something clicked. And you're like, why didn't I ever see that? Why did I ever see that? We were blinded too. But our response to being blinded was one of liberty, was one of exuberance, and quite worried about our family members who are not seeing it. We're very upset that they're not, being able to see, and we try to tell them and they don't understand it. Unfortunately, our family members are not going to murder anybody to keep them out of it. But so did that spark any comments there?
I have one thing that I found interesting. You know, at the very end of last chapter, it says that the Pharisees gave a command: if anyone knew where he was, they should report him, that they might seize him. And here we have hundreds of people, or well, you know, dozens, I'm sure, maybe hundreds, showing up, calling Hosanna, Hosanna, you know, when he goes up to Jerusalem. And then people that are go out to meet them. I guess maybe that's the same group, because partly because of Lazarus. So it seemed like there are a whole lot of people that knew where he was, but somehow the Pharisees, the chief priest, didn't get the memo.
Yeah, that's a good one, because they are actually witnessing their power disintegrate. And remember also in the last chapter, the people were coming to get cleansed for the festival. So the nation was being faithful. They were coming in to confess their sins, to get clean so that they could keep the Passover. And the Pharisees were standing on a high place looking to see where Yeshua was so they could nab him and kill him. Instead of looking at what was happening, that their work worked. Their teachings worked. They had a faithful nation. They had a faithful nation that was occupied by Rome, that was willing to risk life and limb to come worship Yahweh the appropriate way. And instead, their hearts were full of evil. They didn't see that the people were coming. They were staring, trying to find him and get him. Yep. Totally clouded. Now, also remember in the Lazarus resurrection, when Yeshua says that he didn't call to Yahweh for his sake, he did it out loud for the people's sake. This is why. Remember, these chapters aren't really there, right? We think the story ends at the chapter break. This is the point of it, that the world has heard a man can be resurrected. The resurrection of the dead is real. We don't have to debate this topic anymore. Here's the guy who was dead and is now alive, and the whole world is wanting to know, how did that happen?
Also, Yeshua pointed them out of their malice heart and their deceitful ways. So they didn't like that they were being called out either.
Yeah.
Who likes to be called out on what they're doing wrong or what their sin is. So that was part of the reason they wanted to kill him too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. He's shaming them. But he goes on to say that he's not shaming them. They're shaming themselves by their actions. Yep. Yep. So there were some Greeks among those who were going up to worship at the feast. And these came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida of Galilee, and began to ask him, "Sir, we want to see Yeshua." Philip came and told Andrew, and Andrew and Philip came and told Yeshua. And Yeshua said, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified." This matches to verse 32 and why the Greeks are mentioned. He's going to draw all mankind to himself now. This is something the Pharisees also did not want to happen. They wanted to keep the religion boxed off, just them, no evangelism, no reach, no outreach. They wanted to keep it for restoration so that Jerusalem would be restored, Judea would be restored, and they would go back the way they were under Solomon. That's not his goal. That's not our goal, right? When our Passover ends, we say next year in the new Jerusalem. We don't say next year in Jerusalem, right? We're looking for the new Jerusalem. We're looking for something greater. We're looking for that ultimate fulfillment, and that the whole world has this opportunity, not just people with the bloodline. So, Yeshua said, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified." And now, imagine if you're with him and he's saying he's going to be glorified. You're thinking neon lights, right? You're thinking he's going to be, this is going to be great. He's going to be glorified. And he's like, he follows it up with, "I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit." What are you talking about? What is that? What does a grain of fruit have to do with you being glorified? They would just be confused. But he had to, this thing with Lazarus. Lazarus dies, he lets him die so he can resurrect him, so that the world can know that resurrection's true, so that he can do the same thing with Yahweh resurrecting him when he comes up, and then the whole world gets to testify, not just the Jews. And the whole world decides to change. The biggest miracle, we lament ancient Christianity for its problems, but the world did stop being idolaters. They did. They put away the idols, except Rome renamed them, right? Right. But for the most part, the world stopped worshiping all the false deities. So there was a lot of good. And he says, he who loves his life loses it, and he who hates his life in this world will keep it to life eternal. If anyone serves me, he must follow me, and where I am, there my servant will be also. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him. Okay. That is, do I have that written down? Yes, Psalm 2. Psalm 2. Do homage to the Son, that he not become angry and you perish in the way, for his wrath may soon be kindled. How blessed are, I should start one more. Worship Yahweh with reverence and rejoice with trembling. Do homage to the Son, that he not become angry and you perish in the way, for his wrath may soon be kindled. How blessed are all who take refuge in him. So sometimes my favorite translation doesn't put it in all caps when it ought to, right? It should have been in all caps. Why are the nations in an uproar and the people devising a vain thing? The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers counsel against Yahweh and against his Messiah. This should say his Messiah. It says his anointed, saying, let us tear their feathers apart and cast away their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. Then he will speak to them in anger and terrify them in his fury, saying, but as for me, I have installed my king upon Zion, my holy mountain. I will surely tell of the decree of Yahweh. He said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will surely give the nations as your inheritance, and the very ends of the earth as your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron. You shall shatter them like earthenware. Now therefore, O kings, show discernment. Take warning, O judges of the earth. Worship Yahweh with reverence and rejoice with trembling. Do homage to the Son, that he not become angry and you perish in the way, for his wrath may soon be kindled. How blessed are all who take refuge in him. This is what's happening at the crucifixion. That Yeshua is dying, and all the nations are going to hear about this. All the nations are going to go follow Melech Yerushalayim, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Israel. They're going to go follow him. Not the way anybody thinks, but this is really just ties everything together. And the other subtitle today is how Yahweh and Yeshua are separate beings. I know everybody gets up and leaves, right? Right. But it was prophesied for it to be like that. It was prophesied for the Father to set up the Son. That's what we see in Genesis with your seed shall bruise the heel. What we see with Joseph, how Joseph gets betrayed by his country, then he becomes the Pharaoh of Egypt. He has all the power of Pharaoh, but there's still that Pharaoh up there who could take it away. Then when his family comes, guilty as can be, he has the authority to smite them and doesn't do it, right? Yeshua had the authority at this point to wipe these people out. He had the authority to say, all right, Yahweh, they don't deserve it. We're going a different way, right? He had the authority to do that. Instead, he bore our transgressions, and he died in the knowledge that Yahweh would resurrect him. What happens when he asks Yahweh to resurrect Lazarus? Yahweh hears him and does it, which proves to Yeshua, you're getting the same. Right before he goes off to die, Yahweh is saying, you watch, if I could do it for Lazarus, of course I'm going to do it for my own son. You know? So all this is just ties together so well, right? Sorry. Does anybody else want to talk? No. All right. Now my soul has become troubled. Oh, Everett came on, Mike. What's up, buddy?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there, as far as these Greeks that wanted to see him, that he basically tossed off. I'm thinking that he is focused on what's happening, and he doesn't want the adoration of men to interfere with what's going on in his mind and his determination to follow through with his task. I'm just wondering if that wasn't part of the reason that we really don't, these Greeks must have been frustrated, it's kind of baffled me,
He blew him off, but it might make sense here in a second, right? It might make sense here in a second. Because 27, now my soul has become troubled. What shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. What am I supposed to say? Father, save me from this hour. This is why I'm here. This is why I'm here. For this purpose, I came to this hour. So he can't. So what's he supposed to say? Don't do this. And he's seeing all these things happening, and it's got to be heartwarming because it was his mission, and his mission is coming to fruition. And he says, Father, glorify your name. Well, take a stop here and make you understand that the Father has a name that is not the name of the Son. Okay. This is why you were talking to me last night about the restored names. Very important because it's not the Lord, it's Yahweh, right? And it's Yeshua. And they're very complementary, but they have different names. And then a voice came out of heaven. I have both glorified it and will glorify it again. Are you ready for the big reveal, Everett? Why were the Greeks there?
Okay.
Because the new covenant is about to be inaugurated with a mixed multitude.
Well, yeah.
The mixed multitude at the base of Mount Sinai heard, I am Yahweh your Elohim who took you out of the land of the Mitzrayim. New covenant, right here, Greeks and Jews. I have both glorified it and will glorify it again. That's why they're there. So that it is no doubt this applies to all mankind. No more separation. It's anybody who comes to Yeshua is grafted into the family of Yahweh. Yep.
I'm wondering, were those Greeks Gentiles or were those Greeks Jews?
They would probably be called, don't they call them Hellenistic Jews? I don't know if John does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Hellenistics just means that they're a Greek background.
Greek
doesn't it?
friendly.
The Hellenists were Jews that had Greek, history or
Yeah.
culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going with it as if they were Greeks or Jews, like as a synonym for Gentiles. Let's go see what it says. Right? It's just going to say Greeks. There's no insight here.
Right. Yeah.
Helen. That's it could be both, right? That did not help at all.
Yeah. I mean, there were certainly Greeks probably that hung around the synagogue, God-fearers, but to make a trek to Jerusalem for the feast, it seemed to me would more likely be done by Jews by heritage, that happen to live in Greece.
If we want to trust this one, it says especially a non-Jew, Gentile/Greek.
Okay.
So, yeah. But yep, it could go both ways, and that didn't help. So,
Well, it says in the verse before that all the world had gone
Yeah.
to see him, so that does fit thematically.
yeah, nations.
Yeah, that could just be a kind of a generalism as well, that they were worried sick about their own little fiefdom.
Yeah, you're right. It's probably a little of both. Yep. Now judgment is upon this world. Now the ruler of this world will be cast out. And if I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all men to myself. So there we go. Now it's all men, right? And this probably says anthropos.
Yeah.
Pas, including all the forms of pas. Draw all. It's just all. Same word. Whatsoever, whole, everything. Yeah. Yeah. So,
Well, and certainly we know that God is the God of Jews and Gentiles, you know.
oh yeah, man, God. Now he was saying this to indicate what type of death he was going to die. The crowd answered him, "We have heard from the law that the Messiah is to remain forever. How is it you say the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man?" So that's, they have many references to the permanence of the Son, of the Christ coming forever. They didn't understand the mechanism. I mean, Isaiah 53 does talk about him being beaten. Psalm 22 talks about him being beaten. So they didn't quite get it, but it's hard to get it when you're living it. When your present circumstance is being kind of free, but kind of oppressed by the Romans, you're really looking for an avenue, an off-ramp, and they couldn't see it. And the Pharisees were determined not to see it. They were really just, almost maniacal,
Was it that they were being deceived, or that like in the end times, how the elite will not even know what's going on because they're going to turn their backs? So like at the end times, they're not going to know that it's Satan ruling and misguiding them. So maybe that's like this case. I don't know.
Yeah, probably. I mean, there's going to be a lot of people who, look how secular the country is now. Look how secular it is, and how we think that just changing policy is going to fix our lives, right? If policy has to be driven by morality, and no morality, then your policy is just whatever you feel like today, right? And so there's a lot of people out there who just, and when I spent time in airports last week. The amount of $60,000 to $80,000 pickup trucks parked at these airports, people who just have so much disposable income that when Israel got wealthy, they forgot God. The world is secular, and a lot of people are really well off that they probably don't even realize, that there's a problem, Well, kiddo's squawking over there. Page 2. I thought about bringing it like a tech manual sometime, and then just talking for an hour and then turning one page. Right? Right. 35. Yeshua said to them, "A little while longer, the light is among you. Walk while you have the light, so that darkness will not overtake you. Also, the one who walks in the darkness does not know where he is going. While you have the light, believe in the light, so that you may become sons of light." These things Yeshua proclaimed, and he went away and hid himself from them. Genesis 1, let there be light. Before there was the sun, a moon, and stars, let there be light. You guys know what Messiah means, right? Mashiach, which means to anoint with oil. The oil is how they had light. That's the purpose of the anointing, is to say, is kind of taking a piece of the light and putting it on a person. So when he's talking about himself as the light, he's the light of the world. He displays Yahweh. He displays Yahweh more than Moses displayed Yahweh. When Moses' face shone, that was his anointing, his shining. So he's the light of the world. And then he had to go hide. Yes, ma'am.
Wasn't Satan the light bearer? Or was
What
he?
was he?
What was it? Something with the light. He was the light of something.
Lucifer.
Lucifer, yeah.
Yeah.
Which
Light giver.
light giver.
Oof.
Yeah.
Brutal.
Yeah.
See how close you can get and fall? That's also got to be terrifying. You know, that's, because in his heart, what did he do? He stole something that didn't belong to him, just like Judas. He wanted the worship and the glory for himself, which Yeshua never wants. You guys know he is always subordinate. He always deflects to with Father, always says, whoa, I didn't come to say my words, but the will of him who sent me, right? Which is the purpose of a Messiah, the purpose of one like Moses. Moses took whatever Yahweh told him and spit it out, no matter what happened to him, except for the one time when he whacked a rock, right? Right? He was supposed to speak to the rock. It's like, dear rock, we want some water. And instead he went, and that was a mistake. Because it says the rock was Messiah, right? In the later, so he actually hit the Messiah when he did that. So he bruised the Messiah, like Isaiah 53. Pretty tough stuff. I'm sure he had ample opportunity to apologize. So, 36 to 38. Okay. Though he had performed many signs in their sight, they were still not believing in him. This happened so the word of Isaiah the prophet, which he spoke, would be fulfilled. Yahweh, who has believed our report, and to whom has the arm of Yahweh been revealed? For this reason, they could not believe, for Isaiah said again, he has blinded their eyes and he has hardened their heart so that they will not see with their eyes and understand with their heart and be converted, and so I will not heal them. This is deep stuff. We could go look at Isaiah. But what I wanted to really, hammer down, because he actually 38 is referencing Isaiah 53, by the way. That is directly tied into all this. And then the other one references Isaiah 42:19. But the point is that miracles don't produce faith, right? And today, I see a lot of people lamenting online, why don't we have healings? Why don't we have this? Why don't we have that? What would it do? What would it do? When they fed thousands of people, the next day, they didn't say, hey, could you pick up the story where you left off? The next day they showed up, they chased him across the lake to say, hey, can we get some of that food, man? Right? Right? That was the best fish I've ever had. Same with the miracles, the 10 plagues in Egypt, right? It didn't produce faith because they immediately got on the other side of the Red Sea after watching miracle upon miracle upon miracle, and they still grumbled, and they still said they wanted to go back for some cucumbers. Must have been some good cucumbers. I mean, just saying. They wanted to go back. The miracles didn't produce any faith. The miracles are there to get your attention. So that way then you listen. And you're like, oh, that's why Lazarus was resurrected, because someday I'm going to be resurrected. Oh, the resurrection's real. To get us to understand that there's a much larger thing happening, not just for the Messiah, but for all of mankind. At some point, he's going to come back, and the dead in Christ will rise out of the graves, and they'll go up in the air, and they'll meet him in the air, and we'll be with him. Praise Yahweh, we'll be with him. And then he's going to come down and set up shop in Mount Zion, and we're going to have 1,000 years. And at the end of the 1,000 years, there's going to be a resurrection of the entire world, right? So all these small things that we study happen again and get bigger and then get bigger. And that's why he has to blind their eyes so that the plan gets fulfilled. Then think about when you've had good teachers in your life. You've had good teachers in your life at school or at work who let you mess up so that you would learn your lesson. They let you go down a path. You thought you could fix the machine this way. You thought you could do the math that way. And they, rather than making you a robot and saying, no, don't do it that way. They're patient, and they let you walk it out, and you make the mistake, and then you learn your lesson, and then you really appreciate the lesson. What happens in Acts 2? after all of this stuff, this Jesus whom you crucified, whom God raised from the dead, all of a sudden, they're all repentant and he did that. And that's a miracle of Acts 2, is that those people finally had their eyes opened and finally realized what they had done. And thousands of people get baptized in the name of Yeshua. So we shouldn't lose faith that that's going to happen again. These times are really dark. And we wake up every day looking at the news like, what crazy thing is going to happen this week? Venezuelan gangs taking over apartment complexes in Colorado? What the heck is that all about? Right? Every day is some new crazy thing. When is the world going to repent? You know, how bad does it have to get? I don't want to know. Okay. It was a rhetorical question. Okay. It's bad, worse upon worse upon worse. You see, you can't even get news out of Brazil or Britain right now. Britain is under siege internally from Islamic protesters are taking over Great Britain. That's unheard of. And they're capitulating. So this is really, really bad. And people got to realize that, repentance is the only way out. It's not policy. I mean, you do need to protect yourself, but anyway. I am totally rambling. Isaiah 40, verse 41. These things Isaiah said because he saw his glory and he spoke about him. This is a big question for you guys. How much do you think the prophets knew? Moses knew about the book of life. Exodus 32:32. If not, blot me out of your book which you have written. Moses knew the book of life was already complete 4,000 years in advance, right? How much did Moses know? He saw the pattern on the mountain. He saw something in the heavens that he was able to copy. David had the plans to build the temple that he gave to Solomon. We don't have those plans. We just have references to it in there. How much do you think these guys knew? How hard would it be for Isaiah, Jeremiah, Zechariah to walk around and know what they knew? Ezekiel, rather, right? For Isaiah to walk around and know that his entire country had to be burned to the ground, to go into captivity for 70 years for the prophecy of the Messiah to come true. I mean, that would be pretty heavy to walk around with that. What do you guys think? It says right here. He spoke about it. Abraham, before Abraham was, I am, and Abraham yearned to see his day, and he saw it. How much did Abraham know? Yeah. Could you imagine? Because we have that knowledge. We know what's coming. We have Revelation 20. We have 1 Corinthians 15. We have these chapters where Paul is very casually saying, each in his own order. Christ the first fruits, and then us at his coming, and then comes the end when he hands over the kingdom to God. And right? He's just casually talking about that to people, right? Which means that the New Testament authors saw a lot, and they had to walk around with it. Now we have to take it on faith. We don't have any visions. Maybe you do. I don't. Right? Right? And when I did, I used to have deja vu, and it was the most worthless deja vu, right? Right? It was like, it'd be at an intersection. I'd come up to an intersection, and I'd know which sequence of cars and lights were going to go through, but it wasn't like I could save a kid or anything. It was just, it was just that. There was no reason for it at all. I'm like, well, thank you, I guess. Right? And so, yeah, but the word, no, it wouldn't do any good. It wouldn't do any good for me to get a vision, right? Visions go to people who are not studiers, right? Nobody's, nobody's gonna listen. Came to the
Okay,
meeting,
the
right?
issue right now, if we did have one, and well, we do, we have the
Yeah.
prophecies that we know are true. And we're in a time that things are changing, the cycle's happening, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
No day and time we're saying, or anything like that. It's just, and people that should know better and are believers of a long way, 20, 30, 40 years worth of, they say, oh, it's just, it's all conspiracy. Everything out there that's happening is not really happening. It's just
Yeah.
political, or it's conspiracy theory. I mean, those words are still just like it was
Yeah.
when the COVID thing came down the chain. Not everybody's doing that, but most people don't see the forest for the trees because Torah is irrelevant. Irrelevant.
And even in the Torah community, the prophecies are big. And Tagora has a great perspective on that. I don't know that he's ever given it though. It might have just been him, and Tagora's our friend who lives. He's in Florida now. All right. Yeah, he's in Florida. But he's study Greek and study Hebrew. Still, we come to the same conclusions, right? And his thing is that the conspiracy theory people basically say Satan's going to win, right? That when they get into this conspiracy theories, that there's all this, the triangle and the eyeball, and there's all these people behind it. He's like, they're giving Satan way too much power, right? And he's like, why do they do that? But he's got a really good perspective on that. And I mean, conspiracy, you don't even need a conspiracy today, right? Yeah. Yeah. Covenant. Yeah. Right. Right. Again, I think your point is that it doesn't matter what flavor out you are. Yeah. 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 Tiff? No.
Like, when the end times come, people will say this has always been like this. There's always been war. There's always been tornadoes, hurricanes, volcanoes. There's always been these in the past. So they don't look at it as anything different.
I'm guilty. I'm guilty of that. Like I said, we wake up in the morning and there's a ship sideways in the Suez Canal, and the entire the entire world's economy comes down. And I'm like, oh, that's revelation. Okay. That's revelation right there, right? If one ship goes sideways and it messed up the entire world's economy, and it says Babylon is falling and the merchants are looking, right? I mean, if we are getting wake-up calls right and left, and the tsunami happens, or the earthquake in Iraq, or the hurricane in Haiti, and our country goes and saves everybody, right? What are they going to say when this country can't do it anymore? We're pretty close. We're pretty close to not being able to do that anymore.
I think part of it too is that we're numb to things that go on.
Yeah.
Just like if you see a homeless man in the street and you don't stop to help him because you've seen 10 homeless men on the way,
Guilty.
it's like your senses are dead into that. Like they're killing our senses to everything else because it's going to be a normalized thing. Well, we're not looking out for we're looking out for this one big bang, like they were looking out for Yeshua to save them, and it's slowly progressing to where we're numb to it.
You are definitely on with the one big bang. That's why people are always looking for what's the mark of the beast, because they all want to be a C student, right? They want to go, okay, all I got to know is to not take this one sign. And if I can figure out what that one sign is, I can do whatever else I want to do, right? And that was a good point, because that's not the point at all, right? When people want to figure out who the two witnesses are, right? So when they know who they are, they can get right. But why do we have two witnesses? Because the two witnesses are going to convict the world of breaking Torah, a lifestyle, right? Two witnesses comes from Torah. That's why you have two witnesses. So don't worry about who, worry about what they're doing. So if you're worried about that, follow the Torah. You don't have anything to worry about, right? You just keep on going. Yeah. All right. I think I need to take more late flights. I'm chatty today. Yeah. Are we ever going to finish this chapter? Nevertheless, even of the rulers believed in him, even of the rulers believed in him because of the Pharisees, they were not confessing him, so they would not be excommunicated from the synagogue, for they loved the approval of people rather than the approval of God. Probably a good place for me to shut up and let Everett tell his story about the people who followed the men back into the Sunday system again, right? Right? That's the first thing that gets us when we start telling people that Christmas is pagan. You can't be doing that. You're giving glory to a false god. And they immediately say, what about the kids? This is the only time the family gets together. Right?
We make it right in our own eyes. We're not celebrating that God, or we're not making it about that God. We're making it about our God. And we're not doing exactly like they did, so it's okay. So there's always that justification.
Yeah. Yep. Same with Sunday system, same with Easter, same with all of these things. Well, does it matter what you call it? If you're when Yahweh looks down to worship, look at Israel, and when he saw those people who were going into the temple to purify themselves for Passover, what Passover were they purifying themselves for? The one that the Messiah became the Lamb of God. Do you think that he was happy that they were doing what they were supposed to do? I think he was. Do you think he was not happy with the people who were not doing what they were supposed to do? I think that your actions, it's not just belief. You've got to put one foot in front of the other. Yeah. And loving the approval of people rather than the approval of God. Bunch of politicians. So Yeshua cried out and said, the one who believes in me does not believe only in me, but also him who sent me. Those words only and also aren't really there. Does not believe in me, but in him who sent me. So when you look at what Yeshua did, you are looking, this is where people get confused, because he is the image of the eternal Elohim. That doesn't just mean facsimile, right? That means character, thought, action, love, mercy, humor, sarcasm. They have it. You read the book of Isaiah. Yeah, Isaiah makes fun of those false gods. They have sarcasm. They have emotion. They have empathy. They have anger. They can be persuaded. Moses talks to them. Abraham talks to them. So when he's the perfect image of Yahweh, he's saying, if you see him, you've seen Yahweh, right? My son's walking around here somewhere, right? So we used to go to the Sukkot, the one that Everett goes to in Oklahoma. And my son went the year before I did. When he was like 10, 11, right? And he went because we had to go to some boot camp graduation. So he went with some friends. The next year I show up and they go, you're Brent's dad. Before they even know, they see my son and he looks like me. I've seen your kid before they know anything. You see the son, you've seen the father, right? Anyone who sees me sees him who sent me. And he didn't come to do his own will. He was a perfect vessel to just do his father's will at every single stage of the game. And he says, I've come as light into the world so that no one who believes in me will remain in darkness. If anyone hears my teachings and does not keep them, I do not judge them, for I did not come to judge the world, but to save the world. So he comes to give an avenue for salvation. We get to choose it. We have free will. And this predestination and free will work like gears. It's not one or the other. They work completely together. Apostle Paul is my favorite go-to for this one. Here you have a guy who has got Roman citizenship, highest educated rabbi in the world, and he's got respect from the Sanhedrin. He can go anywhere in the empire, and he becomes the apostle to the Gentiles, right? Did he, in his wildest dreams, think his life had thing one to do with a Gentile? No. He studied all that to be a rabbi to the Jews. That was his focus. But Yahweh had a different plan for him. All along the way, his parents, his rabbis, they had choice. They had actions to take to educate him. Then when he's converted on the road to Damascus, all of that talent Yahweh takes and uses it for his glory and switches it around. So he was predestined at the foundation of the world. Paul was predestined to be that guy. He didn't think so, right? And so his free will played a part of that. So did all the other people's free will. That people, even he had to go get healed by Gentiles, right? Yeah. So all that stuff was there for free will, but also because all those things were predestined at the same time. And so Yeshua says he didn't come to judge the world, but to save the world. The one who rejects me and does not accept my teachings has one who judges him, the word which I spoke. That will judge him on the last day. What happens on the last day? Books are open, and the book of life is open, and the dead are judged on the things which are written in the books, which are the records of the deeds of the people, will be judged against what Yeshua and Yahweh have taught. And he's saying, you have a choice. He didn't speak on his own, but the Father himself, who sent him, had given him a commandment as to what to say and what to speak. And I know that his commandment is eternal life. Therefore, the things I speak just as the Father has told me. And that's the gospel. That he didn't do his will all the way to the point of being rejected on the cross. You don't think that when he was up on that cross and they were saying, you think you're the Messiah, you think you're the Son of God, why don't you come down? He was when it says he was tempted in all ways, you don't think he was tempted at that point to go, yeah. I'm gonna let them have it. But he didn't do it. He stayed up there for the story to keep going. And I think this is another artificial chapter break, but nope, it's not. So, all right. Any closing stuff? I've only been talking for 2 hours. It's 3:00.